So, I spent the entire weekend with the DNF Duel beta, and it was alright. Some of you may remember that I really did not like the first beta, and it didn't really change a whole lot for this beta, except for one thing that made a huge difference to me, and that was the walk speed. Apparently no one really noticed the walk speed except me. I only played Hitman in both betas, so it's possibly character specific, but it actually made the entire game feel way better for me. I think that even in a slower paced ground fighting game, it's important that movement feels snappy and responsive, and I definitely felt that more this beta compared to the last one. The other thing I really like about this game is the mana system. The way risk-reward changes with different amounts of mana adds some interesting layers. It feels like an expansion of how risk-reward options change in other games depending on whether or not a character is 50 meter, except in a much higher variety of game states. Since mana and max mana values are constantly changing, the game states have a lot of variety despite the game being pretty simple in its structure. Additionally, I feel that the mana system allowed them to go all in on the toolkits. They weren't afraid to give characters very defined and strong toolkits, and while I can't say every character is quite defined in this beta, it does feel like a genuinely good direction for the game to go. I also just like the offensive flow of DNF Duel. I think like most people, I was convinced that this was going to be another strike-throw game, but the offensive structure actually varies a lot between characters. Some of these characters do enforce mix-up through strike-throw or other means, but some characters are also looking to crank the guard bar and base their offense mostly on that. There are some more traditional mix-up characters as well, particularly Kunoichi. The existence of the block button does kind of negate cross-ups, but there are also reasons to not use the block button, so I guess it evens out. That being said, there's a lot of stuff I don't like about this game. The first, and probably the biggest one, is probably the Awakening system. The Awakening bonuses in DNF Duel, at least in this build, are ranging from extremely noticeable to like not really effective at all. Like in Vanguard's case, he's supposed to get extra chip, but it's not even noticeable. The amount of white health doesn't even really change, and I don't even think I really care if he's in Awakening. But I played Hitman, and Hitman was just extremely game-changing because now you had better RPS with DP and the risk-reward was awesome, and you could rob people by hitting people, which is DP clone super. That wasn't even the most optimal route. Like by the end of the beta, I was able to add even more to it and take almost 50% for getting hit by a DP, which to me just feels ridiculous. I do kind of wonder if the game's damage is going to end up being high enough that Awakening State will be more of a punishment for not having good routing, but either way, I'm just not a fan of this kind of mechanic, especially since losing health already increases your max mana, so I don't really see the need for an additional comeback mechanic on top of that. It just seems really overblown. Maybe they just need to be more evenly spread across the board, but I really didn't care for it. And the second thing I really didn't care for is conversion. I'm actually fine with conversion as a concept. It's essentially an RC that you can use to make certain pokes more threatening. What I strongly dislike, and I think every single person I talk to agrees that this is a really bad part of the game, is that conversion is tied to your white health. And the thing is that when you're comboing someone, the white health damage you do is taken away if you hit them with a mana skill. And so you never really are left with white health to use unless you're taking a lot of chip or you're just getting hit by stray pokes, which just doesn't feel right. This is just such a weird thing to tie an RC system to, even though I think it's actually pretty cool. As Hitman, it was fun to have my pokes have potentially more reward with conversion, but it was just hard to manage that system because it felt like I was having it available as a result of punishment, not because I was doing something else well. I'd really rather that that system gets scrapped altogether or just tied to some kind of different mechanic because it did not feel good to use at all. I like how white health fits into the game in pretty much every other instance. The only thing I would say is that it just doesn't feel like it has too much of an impact until it's removed. Like the damage you do to people isn't real until the white health is gone, so combos are like removing it from you anyway, and it just kind of feels overblown. I don't know. As for the characters, like I said earlier, all the character toolkits are pretty interesting. I would say Vanguard doesn't really feel that defined. I don't really get what he's supposed to do. Hitman also kind of has the same issue where it doesn't feel like he's super defined, but he does have the Robbery Awakening. But depending on what happens with Awakening, that might not even be his most defining factor. Meanwhile, characters like Berserker just feel like they're completely playing the system perfectly. And additionally, I do think that even with these mechanics that I praise, the game is going to end up being very counterpick heavy. This might be a game where you just learn multiple characters and end up counterpicking. Unless there's a character who just wins every matchup, then they're going to be the meta character. So I don't know, there's definitely room to express yourself in DNF Duel, but it does have a lot of that modern fighting game stuff that I'm just not really that into. Especially since I've been playing KOF 15 and Persona 4 Arena recently, both of which are games which feel very open-ended and expressive. DNF Duel feels kind of stale in comparison. That being said, as much as I'm complaining, I did play it the whole weekend. Like, I actually played this game way more than I expected to. So it was fun. I think I'm going to play this game casually when it comes out, but I would like to see a little more from the engine. It just doesn't quite hit for me. If you like this video, please catch me on Twitch or subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also book me for coaching in BlazBlue at metafy.com/@barlow.